Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing right now in Washington is nothing short of extraordinary. Donald Trump has just executed a political maneuver so calculated, so unexpected, that it's sending shockwaves through every corner of the nation's capital. The establishment is scrambling, the media can't keep up, and millions of Americans are asking the same question: what just happened? Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see everything unfolding in American politics right now. Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we're diving deep into the stories that matter, the ones that shape our nation's future. Today, we're breaking down Trump's latest political earthquake and why it has Washington insiders, career politicians, and political analysts completely blindsided. This isn't just another news cycle story. This is about power, strategy, and the kind of bold decision-making that either reshapes a political landscape or blows up in spectacular fashion. We're going to examine every angle, look at the reactions from both sides of the aisle, and try to understand what this means for America moving forward. Since returning to the White House in January after his decisive victory over Kamala Harris in the November election, Trump has been anything but predictable. But even by his standards, what transpired over the last 72 hours has left political Washington reeling. The move came without warning, without the typical leaks to friendly media outlets, without the advanced preparation that usually signals major political shifts. One moment, the Capitol was operating under one set of assumptions about how the next few months would unfold. The next moment, everything changed. To understand why this particular decision has caused such upheaval, we need to step back and look at the political environment Trump inherited when he took office. The country remains deeply divided, perhaps more so than at any point in modern history. The economy continues to generate heated debates, with inflation concerns still weighing on American families, even as some indicators show improvement. International tensions simmer on multiple fronts, from ongoing conflicts in various regions to complex trade relationships that impact American workers and businesses. Immigration remains a flashpoint issue that generates passionate responses from all sides. And perhaps most significantly, trust in American institutions continues to decline, with citizens across the political spectrum expressing frustration with how Washington operates. Into this volatile mix, Trump has now introduced his latest strategic move, and the timing could not be more consequential. What exactly did he do? The specifics involve a combination of personnel decisions, policy announcements, and political positioning that together represent a fundamental shift in approach. Without getting lost in the minutiae, the essence of Trump's move centers on consolidating power within his administration while simultaneously challenging the traditional power structures that have long dominated Washington decision-making. The personnel component involves significant changes to key positions within the executive branch. These aren't just routine appointments or replacements. These are strategic placements of loyalists and true believers in positions where they can maximize impact and minimize resistance to the Trump agenda. Some of these individuals come from unexpected backgrounds, bringing private sector experience or grassroots conservative credentials rather than the typical Washington resume. This has establishment figures worried because it signals a willingness to circumvent traditional channels and conventional wisdom. The policy aspect is equally bold. Trump has signaled his intention to move forward with several controversial initiatives simultaneously, rather than the typical approach of building consensus and moving incrementally. This all-at-once strategy is designed to overwhelm opposition and create multiple fronts that critics must defend against. It's a high-risk, high-reward approach that either succeeds in creating unstoppable momentum or crashes against the reality of institutional resistance and legal challenges. But perhaps most intriguing is the political positioning element. Trump has effectively thrown down the gauntlet to both Democrats and establishment Republicans, daring them to oppose him while he frames his actions as fighting for ordinary Americans against a corrupt system. This populist framing isn't new for Trump, but the intensity and comprehensiveness of this current push represents an escalation. He's betting that the American people will support disruption over stability, change over continuity, and that his political capital remains strong enough to weather the inevitable backlash. The reaction from official Washington has been swift and predictable in its intensity, if not its specifics. Democrats immediately denounced the moves as authoritarian overreach, with congressional leaders promising investigations and vowing to use every tool at their disposal to provide oversight and accountability. Progressive activists have organized rapid response efforts, mobilizing supporters for protests and coordinating messaging campaigns across social media platforms. Legal experts sympathetic to the Democratic perspective have already begun outlining potential constitutional challenges and exploring what remedies might be available through the courts. But the response from Republicans reveals the more interesting and potentially consequential dynamics at play. The Republican Party remains deeply divided between Trump loyalists who view him as the savior of conservatism and a smaller but vocal group of traditionalists who worry about long-term damage to conservative principles and institutional norms. Trump's latest moves have forced Republicans to choose sides yet again, and many are finding the calculation more difficult this time around. Some Republican senators and representatives have offered full-throated support, arguing that Trump is delivering on campaign promises and that voters gave him a mandate to shake things up. These defenders point to the election results as proof that Americans want exactly this kind of disruptive leadership. They argue that the Washington establishment has failed the country for too long and that dramatic action is not only justified but necessary. For these Republicans, Trump's boldness is his greatest strength, and they're willing to accept whatever controversy comes with it. Other Republicans have offered more cautious responses, supporting some elements while expressing concern about others. These politicians are trying to thread a needle, maintaining credibility with Trump's base while also preserving some independence and adherence to institutional principles. They face a difficult balancing act, knowing that too much criticism could invite a primary challenge from a Trump-backed opponent, while too much support could alienate moderates and independents whose votes they need in general elections. A smaller group of Republicans has broken ranks entirely, arguing that Trump has gone too far and that his actions threaten democratic norms and constitutional governance. These critics face immediate backlash from Trump and his most devoted supporters, with accusations of betrayal and predictions of political consequences. Some have already announced they won't seek re-election, viewing the current Republican Party as incompatible with their principles. Others are trying to mount a resistance from within, though their influence appears limited given Trump's dominance over the party apparatus. Beyond the politicians, other power centers in Washington are responding in ways that reveal the depth of the chaos Trump has unleashed. The intelligence community, still recovering from years of tension with Trump during his first term, now faces renewed scrutiny and pressure. Career civil servants across multiple agencies are grappling with directives that challenge their professional judgment and, in some cases, their sense of mission. Military leaders are navigating the complicated terrain of maintaining civilian control while also preserving military professionalism and readiness. The judicial system is bracing for an onslaught of cases that will test constitutional boundaries and precedents. The media landscape has predictably fractured along ideological lines in its coverage of these developments. Conservative outlets are largely portraying Trump as a decisive leader taking necessary action against a sclerotic establishment. They emphasize his campaign promises, his electoral mandate, and the frustration that millions of Americans feel toward Washington as usual. Liberal media outlets are sounding alarms about authoritarian tendencies, constitutional violations, and threats to democratic institutions. They're giving significant airtime to critics and highlighting potential negative consequences of Trump's actions. But what's perhaps most significant is the response from ordinary Americans, because ultimately their reaction will determine whether Trump's gambit succeeds or fails. Early polling data shows a country that remains as divided as ever, with partisan affiliation being the strongest predictor of whether someone supports or opposes Trump's moves. However, there are some interesting cross-currents beneath the surface-level polarization. Some independent voters who backed Trump in the election are expressing unease about the pace and scope of change. They wanted a president who would shake things up, but they're not sure they signed up for quite this much disruption. These voters represent a potential vulnerability for Trump if opposition can effectively message about stability and governance rather than just opposing Trump for its own sake. Conversely, some voters who didn't support Trump in the election are acknowledging that at least he's trying to do something rather than managing decline or accepting the status quo. They may not agree with his specific policies, but there's a grudging respect for decisiveness and follow-through on campaign promises. Whether this translates into actual political support remains unclear, but it suggests the political dynamics are more fluid than simple partisan breakdowns might suggest. The international dimension adds another layer of complexity to this already chaotic situation. America's allies are watching nervously, uncertain about what Trump's domestic political maneuvers mean for international commitments and relationships. Some worry that a president focused on consolidating domestic power and fighting political battles at home will have less bandwidth for international leadership and crisis management. Others see opportunity, believing they can secure favorable deals with an administration eager to demonstrate wins and willing to break with traditional diplomatic approaches. America's adversaries are also paying close attention and making their own calculations. They're assessing whether this moment of domestic turbulence represents an opportunity to advance their interests while America is distracted and divided. They're testing boundaries, probing for weaknesses, and trying to understand whether Trump's reputation for unpredictability makes him more dangerous or more manageable from their perspective. Looking forward, several scenarios could play out over the coming weeks and months. In the most optimistic scenario for Trump, his bold moves generate momentum that proves unstoppable. Opposition fragments and weakens in the face of accomplished facts on the ground. The economy continues to perform well enough that voters credit Trump's policies. International challenges are managed without major crises. And Trump emerges with his political position strengthened, having successfully broken through institutional resistance and reshaped how Washington operates. In a more pessimistic scenario for Trump, his moves generate such fierce resistance that they become bogged down in legal challenges, congressional investigations, and bureaucratic resistance. Public opinion turns against him as the consequences of disruption become apparent. Republicans begin to distance themselves as they calculate that defending Trump has become politically untenable. And Trump finds himself increasingly isolated and unable to advance his agenda, potentially setting up major losses in the midterm elections. The most likely scenario probably falls somewhere between these extremes, with Trump securing some wins while also facing setbacks and complications. The key question is whether he can maintain enough momentum and support to continue pushing his agenda, or whether resistance hardens to the point where even his considerable political skills and devoted base cannot overcome the obstacles. What's undeniable is that American politics has entered another period of intense instability and uncertainty. The norms and expectations that once governed Washington behavior continue to erode. The partisan divide shows no signs of healing, and may be deepening further. Trust in institutions remains low, and this latest episode is unlikely to restore confidence in government's ability to function effectively. The stakes feel enormous because the decisions being made right now will shape America's trajectory for years to come. For citizens trying to make sense of these developments, the challenge is separating signal from noise in an information environment that often rewards outrage over understanding. It's easy to retreat into partisan camps and consume only information that confirms existing beliefs. It's harder but more important to seek out diverse perspectives, to distinguish between what's genuinely consequential and what's just political theater, and to think carefully about what kind of country we want to be. Regardless of whether you support or oppose Trump, whether you think his latest moves are brilliant or dangerous, it's clear that American democracy is being tested right now in fundamental ways. The questions being raised about executive power, institutional checks and balances, and the relationship between leaders and citizens matter beyond any single administration or political moment. How these questions are answered will define the American political system for generations. Thank you so much for watching, and I want to hear from you in the comments below. What do you think about Trump's latest moves? Are you excited about the changes, or worried about where this is all heading? Do you think this represents the kind of shaking up that Washington needs, or does it go too far? Let's have a real conversation about this, because these issues are too important for us to just retreat into our usual corners. And if you found this breakdown valuable, please hit that like button and share this video with others who are trying to understand what's really happening in American politics right now. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our coverage of the stories that matter most. We're living through historic times, and we're going to keep bringing you the analysis and context you need to make sense of it all. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember that in a democracy, Citizens aren't just spectators, we're participants in shaping our shared future.